I've been looking forward to the Sydney Sweeney Glen Powell rom-com Anyone But You for a while. Now, I was afraid though that all of the best bits were going to be in the trailer, leaving the rest to just be a slog. So did this alleviate my fears or did it confirm them? Bea and Ben look like the perfect couple, but after an amazing first date, something happens that turns their fiery hot attraction ice cold. Until they find themselves unexpectedly thrust together at a destination wedding in Australia. So they do what any two mature adults would do: pretend to be a couple. So there's not much new in the ways of rom-coms. Typically, if a movie can present the story in a fresh way, that can make it a win. Anyone But You is a paint-by-number story where we have two people who had a connection fall into the trope of non-communication to clear up perceptions, and then they're forced to interact later on for the sake of someone else's comfort. Along the way, there's going to be moments when they learn the errors of their ways and eventually fall in love. Alright, so you can call all of the beats out in this one as it goes along. The story and the delivery, it's predictable. But what made this so enjoyable to watch was the chemistry between Sweeney and Powell, and then the antics of all the characters around them. The opening scene, it's great, and it helps to set the tone and expectation that the characters are witty and smart, but also goofy and can get themselves into awkward situations. It's a great setup. Then the movie fumbles a bit with some clumsiness as more characters are introduced and the story just tries to get itself established. Sweeney and Powell are Bea and Ben, respectively, and they're traveling to Australia for Bea's sister's and Ben's friend's wedding. And by this point, they're antagonistic towards each other, allowing snark to create some light comedy. And when they get to their destination, the combo of characters, it doesn't immediately gel, with some performances even feeling like the actors are struggling to remember their lines. Or maybe they were just told to ad-lib and they were having a tough time with that. Both Dermot Mulroney and Brian Brown play the fathers of the ones that are getting married, and they both stumble through some of their scenes. The story progression, it also feels rushed or maybe confused as the scenes transition. But then, once the cast is together, some slapstick begins, and that's when the narrative really just comes together. Now, from that point on, even though just about every scenario is obvious, there's a massive level of cuteness and hope that permeates the story. Sweeney and Powell, they are awesome together, and they have a crap ton of chemistry. They feel like two people who could really fall in love if they could get out of their own way. The comedy is quick, and while it is sometimes cheesy, it's often funny, even unexpected. The trailer repeatedly showed the couple on this mountaintop hike, and they're experiencing some wardrobe malfunctions. These scenes are fine. I mean, it's the portions, though, that weren't shown in the trailer that made me laugh out loud. I love these scenes because they don't have the stars front and center. It's all about what's happening in the background. And with that, it's clever and hilarious. Now, the timing that Sweeney and Powell have together, I thought it was wonderful to watch. They feed off of each other's performances so that their exchanges feel natural and real. And then aside from some of the dialogue delivery wonkiness from either Brown or Mulroney, the supporting cast has a bunch of great actors like Alexandra Shipp, Hadley Robinson, Rachel Griffiths, Charlie Fraser, Joe Davidson, who I'm going to get to in a little bit, Michelle Hurd, and Darren Barnett. The cast as a whole is great as an ensemble, especially when their quirks are amplified. For example, in a scene where Brian Brown and Gata are trying to trick someone, the dialogue back and forth, it's relatably funny, especially if you've ever experienced a conversation between two very different generations. The frustration from Gata and the perplexed responses from Brown, they mix perfectly. It is incredibly cheesy, and sometimes it's even cringy, but it's designed to be that way, and they nail it. Now, another example is when Joe Davidson's character of Beau gets to go full Aussie on Ben and just throw all kinds of phrases at him. They're wildly confusing, but he does it with a straight-faced abandon that you can't help but laugh out loud. Now, the presentation probably is going to feel familiar because this has a lot of the same feels and executions as the rom-coms that we used to get in the 90s and the early 2000s. There's enough cheese and silliness, but it's mixed with massive amounts of heart and then a complete disregard for any shame, which allows the cast to fully embrace absurdities for the sake of laughs. I think it works. The whole movie has a sweetness to it that just kept me engaged, and then more importantly, it had me desperately rooting for Bea and Ben to fall in love because it was so obvious from the get-go that they're great together. And like in pretty much any romance story, there has to be some conflict between the two love interests so that they can experience change and then open their eyes to the true feelings for each other. Now in this, the dramatic turns, they're not overwhelmingly big or sad or angry. I mean, there's tension and it works, but you know how in some rom-coms that drama just gets way out of hand and it threatens to taint the joyous feelings? That didn't happen here. The sweetness and rationale kick in early to save interactions from going off the rails with any depressing tones. And also, don't go in thinking that this is the funniest movie of the year, because it isn't. And it's not laugh out loud from start to finish. But there are times when that happens, and then a lot of chuckling throughout. But what makes it so enjoyable is the relationship aspect and the charisma that's shared between the two leads. If they didn't work, the story wouldn't work either. But they are believable as a couple, especially as each of them showcases just tiny little moments or expressions that feel genuine. Like Sweeney bites her lip at times, and it's brief, not grandiose, but when it was combined with the look in her eyes as she's gazing at Powell, the emotion was believable. And then Powell has a few times when his eyes sparkle. I mean, it's not from lighting with just a literal shine in them, but there's a longing that's displayed that made their connection palpable. The movie's an hour and 43 minutes, and outside some stumbling towards the beginning of the film, the time progresses well. It creates a lot of enjoyment, and it works because of the entire ensemble. So overall, Anyone But You utilizes a throwback feel of late 90s rom-coms with modern sensibilities infused to create decent laughs. The ensemble cast provides great support for Sweeney and Powell, but it's their chemistry, timing, and delivery that make this so enjoyable. Their ups and downs are relatable while still retaining silliness. And while the arcs are predictable and the story takes a bit to find its footing, the final product is a charmingly sweet romance with a relationship that you want to see realized. There's sex, nudity, a ton of profanity, barely any violence. I give Anyone But You 4 out of 5 couches. This surpassed my expectations, and seriously, I can't wait to see it again. So have you seen any good rom-coms lately? I'd love to hear about them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.